When looking at Super Mario 3D All-Stars, it's hard not to get annoyed at its execution. The promise of 3 outstanding Super Mario titles in one package is a great idea, but in execution, it completely failed to match up to any of its competitors. Super Mario 64 being 4x3, Sunshine being locked at 30 FPS with an abundance of bugs that were never present in the original game, and Galaxy's lack of control options and weird graphical glitches. Worst of all, it all clocks in at $60 for 3 games that are way over a decade old, with barely any enhancements made whatsoever. It all just seemed like a sleazy business move from Nintendo. Thankfully, I wasn't alone in this mindset. Countless videos on the matter were made. Big congrats on my man King K for spreading the issues of this game to the masses, and it was a conflict I hadn't seen since the initial blow up of Pokemon Sword and Shield, something that I'm still mad about. You're either on the side that is grateful that the collection exists, or the side that can't stand how scummy of a product the game turned out to be. With Nintendo's ignorance in the modern day, like failing to deliver a quality online service or a lack of substantial features on the Switch, it only seemed logical to come to the conclusion that 3D All-Stars was never getting fixed. Not ever. But, to my absolute surprise, a patch was announced over a month after the game's release that was going to finally add camera control options to the game. For those who may be unaware, 3D All-Stars released with reverse camera controls from the original games, making it not only unviable for many speedrunners such as myself, but also fails in preserving the original games as they were intended to be played, which is an argument that many people have made. However, with this patch, all that would be a thing of the past, and I was excited to play it, until I found out it was 3 weeks away from when it was announced. It was an even bigger wait from when the game was announced and then released, and that made absolutely no sense to me. Here we are though, we're past all of that and the update is live, and just as I had suspected, camera control options wasn't the only thing that was touched. As it turns out, the buggy mess that was Super Mario Sunshine received a huge amount of bug fixes that matches the game back to its original counterpart. No 4x3 underwater bugs, menu lag, incorrect sound effects, and thank God the debug cubes are gone, proving that this wasn't a design decision as some would have you believe. Oh, and the game lags much less as well, which was initially stated to have been the case due to hacked switches, which to put it bluntly, was one of the most ignorant things I had heard people say when trying to combat the issue. Why even try and defend something like that? What benefit do you get from defending performance issues in a game? And it's this mentality that I really want to go over today. There's no doubt in my mind that without the massive backlash with this release, these bug fixes would cease to exist. If it weren't for people posting clips of bizarre, glossed over bugs, Nintendo wouldn't have seen them, and they wouldn't have fixed them. Thank God for these people, because we've now got a much more polished product than what we had previously, and we need more of this. One of the biggest issues I encounter on a daily basis is people dismissing issues because they don't personally affect them, so it doesn't matter. Sunshine's lag was a prime example of this, and personally speaking, hurt me the most. Sunshine is my favourite game of all time. I know how it performs, and I knew for a fact that the lag existed. For me, it would appear very frequently roaming around Isle Delfino, dropping at least 3 to 4 frames when passing certain areas. It was a major distraction for my enjoyment, but I often saw this critique dismissed, because it wasn't that big of a deal and most people aren't going to notice it. Well, I noticed it, many of my friends noticed it, and the people who initially reported on the lag, who were then claimed to have framed the footage, sure as hell noticed it as well. My issue here isn't that someone doesn't notice it, which would be absolutely absurd. If you didn't notice these frame drops, you didn't notice them. But it's the lack of acknowledgement that I think is detrimental to how Nintendo perceives criticism. Think about it this way, what use do you get out of defending the lag? How does that benefit you or the game? Would you rather have a game that lags, or one that doesn't? Not to sound like an objectivist, but the lag was 100% there, otherwise Nintendo wouldn't have tackled it in the patch, and so with such an obvious issue, why didn't more people call it out? I don't like the idea of people defending issues that are pretty much objective flaws. Issues such as limited time releases, Super Mario 64 being 4x3, if a 16:9 option was added, you could have both styles, eliminating the preservation argument, which was already dismissed with this version of the game being the Shindao version, rather than the one that most people grew up with. Sunshine being 30 FPS, and Galaxy's lacking control options, especially in handheld mode. The argument I'm trying to present here is a tricky one, because I don't want people to feel forced to talk about issues if they just don't care enough for it. I just want to provide food for thought. How does defending these issues help you as a consumer? Wouldn't you rather have options, better game performance, more bang for your buck? Personally speaking, if I see an issue, even if it doesn't explicitly ruin my experience, I'm still going to call it out. I've had loads of fun with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, but the performance issues are just terrible. Completely terrible. Link's Awakening had a similar issue with this, and it still annoys me to this day. I don't believe enough people talked up about it for it to be a real concern for Nintendo, and it's this that I truly want to change. The last example I want to use is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, which while I think is a great game, still suffers from performance issues. Mainly, the game runs at a mere 720p with a dynamic resolution, so it can go as low as 500p. Seeing the game run at high resolutions on emulators makes me so upset, because behind the poor resolution is a beautifully crafted art style that I wish I could experience on my own Nintendo Switch. I don't see the use of defending the 720p resolution here because the art style carries the game, or the game has so much content that it doesn't matter. It definitely matters to some people, and an increase in resolution would only improve the experience for every single person playing the game. Again, I'm not trying to tell you that you must be angry about these issues. If it doesn't bother you, then don't let anyone else tell you any different. I just wish that more people, even if it doesn't affect them personally, would call out these issues in hopes of being heard by Nintendo. That's pretty much the crux of my argument. It's such a fine line to walk across, but I truly believe that if we spoke up about these issues just as much as people did with 3D All-Stars, we would end up with much better games and experiences. Super Mario 3D All-Stars proved this. Hell, it even added GameCube controller support for Super Mario Sunshine, which feels amazing. I hate criticisms being tossed aside as nitpicks, because that entirely dismisses one's own opinions because of the other person's perceived notion of a nitpick. This logic also dictates that all nitpicks can't be criticized, even if they all add up to create an unpolished and unengaging experience, such as was the case with Super Mario Sunshine. I simply wish that people would speak up about these glaring issues, and not defend these companies like their lives depended on it, telling people to stop complaining and to be grateful for what they have. As a consumer, it's our right to complain. We are the ones buying these products after all. To find a balance between critique and entitlement is a tricky situation, because you do in fact have a level of entitlement. You're literally giving your money to these companies. But it's also important to not dismiss those who enjoy these games despite of their flaws. We don't want to be policing around people who don't agree with you. That's what makes this situation so tough, because on one hand, I just want more people to be more active in criticizing these flaws, whether they're personally affected by them or not. But on the other hand, I don't want people to feel forced to discuss things that they simply don't care about. I hope you will take away some of my insight after you finish this video, and think about whether you want to be taking more action against these companies. In my case, I criticize entirely for the benefit of the consumers, in hopes of being heard, in hopes of these issues being addressed, and thus provide better games for us. I'm no saint, no guardian angel, I just want good games, man.